The manuscript remained hidden for over 7 decades, tucked away among the personal papers of Helen Dukas, the secretary and keeper of Albert Einstein's secrets. When it finally came to light in 2024, it revealed something that would forever transform our understanding of one of humanity's greatest geniuses. It wasn't equations that filled those age-yellowed pages, nor theories about the curvature of space-time. They were words whispered in the twilight of an extraordinary life, intimate confessions about territories science had never dared to map. The recording was made in December 1954, just 4 months before Einstein's death, when the German physicist already felt the weight of years and the proximity of the inevitable. His voice, captured by a primitive tape recorder that Helen kept hidden on her desk, revealed a man completely different from the public figure the world knew. He was no longer the skeptical scientist who scoffed at superstitions, but an elder who had begun to perceive subtle signs of a reality far vaster than any physical theory could explain. In the manuscript's opening lines, Helen described how Einstein had begun to talk about strange dreams and visions that visited him during the early morning hours. He mentioned familiar presences manifesting in his Princeton home, especially during moments of profound loneliness. Initially, the physicist had tried to rationalize these experiences as products of his weary mind, but gradually something had shifted in his perception. He'd begun to realize that these nocturnal encounters followed patterns that defied any purely material explanation. Einstein recounted how his first wife, Mileva Maric, had begun appearing in his dreams with unnerving vividness after her death in 1948. These weren't ordinary memories or distorted fragments of the past, but encounters that seemed to take place in an eternal present where they conversed about issues they'd never resolved during her lifetime. He described how Mileva always appeared young, with the same intellectual intensity that had fascinated him during their student years, but now possessing a wisdom that transcended any earthly knowledge. She spoke of planes of existence that overlapped with our physical world, dimensions where time didn't follow the laws of relativity, but obeyed completely different rhythms, governed by the evolution of consciousness. During these dream encounters, Mileva showed Einstein impossible landscapes where the geometry of space curved not by gravity, but by the intensity of shared feelings and memories. He began to understand that these places weren't poetic metaphors, but real territories of a spiritual geography that existed parallel to the physical universe. There, Mileva explained, souls reunited to continue journeys that death had only temporarily interrupted, never definitively concluded. The physicist described how these experiences initially deeply disturbed him, challenging decades of purely materialistic thought. But gradually, he began to perceive intriguing correlations between these visions and some of the deepest mysteries of quantum physics. The non-locality of entangled particles, which had so troubled him in his theories, seemed to echo the way souls remained connected across different dimensions. Quantum entanglement, which he had called spooky action at a distance, began to make sense when understood as a fundamental property of consciousness, not just matter. Helen recorded how Einstein had begun to observe strange patterns in his daily life, objects disappearing and reappearing in impossible places, the sounds of familiar footsteps echoing through the empty halls of his house, and above all, that constant feeling of being watched by loving but invisible eyes. He especially mentioned manifestations related to his son Edward, who was hospitalized in a psychiatric institution in Switzerland. Even separated by an ocean, Einstein felt his son's spiritual presence almost tangibly, as if Edward could project his consciousness across space to comfort him during moments of greatest anguish. These transcendental connections began to reveal to Einstein a completely new understanding of the nature of reality. He perceived that consciousness wasn't an accidental byproduct of organized matter, but a fundamental force of the universe, as basic as gravity or electromagnetism. During his nightly meditations, he began to visualize consciousness as a cosmic network connecting all forms of life, past, present, and future, in an eternal fabric where no soul was ever completely lost. The manuscript revealed how Einstein had begun to reinterpret his own scientific works under this new spiritual perspective. The theory of relativity, which had revolutionized our understanding of space and time, now seemed to him only a crude approximation of far deeper truths. He understood that there were temporal dimensions where the past, present, and future coexisted simultaneously, allowing souls to navigate through different epochs of their existence. The famous equation E = mc2, which established the equivalence between mass and energy, took on a completely new meaning when applied to the nature of the soul. Consciousness was pure energy, capable of manifesting in different forms and dimensions without ever being truly destroyed. During the last months of his life, Einstein began to perceive increasing signs that his transition to other planes of existence was approaching. These weren't just the physical symptoms of his abdominal aneurysm, but subtle manifestations that seemed to prepare his soul for the great journey. He recounted visions of a golden light that gradually increased in intensity, appearing first at the edges of his peripheral vision and then becoming a constant presence, even with his eyes closed. This light wasn't merely visual, but carried with it information and sensations that transcended any known sensory experience. Helen described how Einstein spoke of nocturnal encounters with scientific figures from the past who had become his spiritual guides. Galileo Galilei frequently appeared, showing him how his astronomical discoveries had been inspired by visions of higher dimensions. Newton came to him to explain how the laws of gravity were merely physical reflections of far deeper spiritual forces that governed the attraction between souls. Maxwell shared insights into how electromagnetic waves served as vehicles through which consciousness could travel between different planes of reality. These revelations gradually transformed Einstein's perspective on the purpose of human life. He began to understand that each earthly existence was like a semester in a cosmic university, where souls came to learn specific lessons about love, compassion, wisdom, and spiritual growth. Life's challenges and sufferings were not random punishments, but carefully designed opportunities to accelerate the evolution of consciousness. His own journey, marked by exile, persecution, family conflicts, and guilt over the destructive uses of his scientific discoveries, now revealed itself as a perfectly planned curriculum to expand his understanding of the dual nature of existence. The physicist described increasingly intense experiences of telepathic communication with other dimensions. During his evening walks around the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, he began receiving direct messages from entities who identified themselves as members of a spiritual council responsible for guiding humanity's scientific evolution. These presences explained how many of history's great scientific discoveries had been inspired by insights transmitted from higher planes of existence, where the accumulated wisdom of advanced civilizations was shared with receptive earthly minds. Einstein now understood that his theory of relativity had been only the first step of a much larger revelation about the multidimensional nature of reality. He perceived that the physical universe was like a shadow projected by higher realities, and that his next phase of existence would allow him to explore these dimensions directly, without the limitations imposed by the material brain. Death was not an end, but a graduation to more advanced levels of cosmic understanding. During his final weeks, Einstein began experiencing spontaneous astral projections, where his consciousness temporarily separated from his physical body to explore spiritual territories. He described journeys to cosmic libraries, where all universal knowledge was stored, not in books but in crystals of light that transmitted information directly to the consciousness. In these locations, he encountered other souls who had dedicated their earthly existences to the pursuit of truth, forming communities of eternal learning, where scientific collaboration continued on transcendental levels. Helen recorded how Einstein spoke of encounters with his sister, Maya, who had passed away in 1951. Maya appeared to him as a radiant presence, explaining how she had become his personal guide in the transition between worlds. She described how the process of dying was similar to birth, a moment of passage where the soul liberated itself from physical limitations to emerge into a completely new and broader environment. Maya reassured him that beloved family members always waited on the other side to receive those making the transition, offering comfort and guidance during the first moments in unknown dimensions. The manuscript revealed how Einstein had begun to realize that his earthly scientific work was coming to an end, not because of age limitations, but because his soul had completed the specific mission for which it had incarnated. His contribution to expanding human understanding of time, space, and energy had prepared the ground for future revelations that would come through other incarnated minds. He understood that he was part of a continuous stream of discoverers, each adding essential pieces to the cosmic puzzle that humanity had been assembling over the centuries. During his final meditations, Einstein experienced extraordinary visions of what awaited his soul after physical death. He described encounters with councils of wisdom, composed of great spiritual masters from all religious traditions, enlightened scientists from various eras, and beings of light who had completely transcended the limitations of physical form. These encounters revealed that his next phase of existence would involve working as a spiritual guide for future generations of earthly scientists, inspiring discoveries that would eventually unify science and spirituality in a higher synthesis. Helen described how during his last days, Einstein constantly spoke of preparations for a great journey. He mentioned spiritual baggage he was organizing, not material objects, but qualities of the soul that he could take with him. Accumulated love, acquired wisdom, developed compassion, and above all, the humility gained through decades of confronting the universe's mysteries. He perceived that these qualities were the only truly permanent possessions, the only treasures that would survive the transition between worlds. The physicist reported experiences of consciousness expansion where he could simultaneously perceive multiple past and future lives, understanding how each incarnation contributed to a larger evolutionary plan. He saw himself in other eras as a mathematician in ancient Greece, an alchemist in the Middle Ages, and glimpsed future existences as an explorer of dimensions yet unknown to present-day humanity. This expanded temporal perspective revealed that the personality of Albert Einstein was only one of the many masks worn by an ancient soul on its cosmic journey of discovery and service. During one of his last transcendental experiences, recorded by Helen in extraordinary detail, Einstein described an encounter with what he called supreme intelligence, not an anthropomorphic God, but an infinite cosmic consciousness of which all other consciousnesses were facets. During this encounter, he understood that the entire physical universe was in fact the body of a supreme being, and that each individual soul was like a neural cell in this gigantic cosmic organism. The evolution of individual consciousness contributed to the evolution of supreme intelligence itself, creating an eternal cycle of growth and expansion. This final revelation completely transformed Einstein's understanding of death and immortality. He realized that death was simply the moment when individual consciousness reintegrated more completely into universal consciousness, maintaining its individuality but expanding its capacity for perception and action. It was like a drop of water returning to the ocean, maintaining its essence, but gaining access to all the power and wisdom of the larger whole. Helen recorded how Einstein had asked that these revelations remain secret until humanity was more prepared to understand them. He feared that in the climate of Cold War tensions and ideological strife of the 1950s, his words on spirituality and transcendence would be misinterpreted or used for political purposes. He preferred that his spiritual discoveries emerge naturally, when more open minds could receive them, without prejudice or distortion. The manuscript ended with Einstein's last recorded words, spoken a few days before his death on April 18, 1955. In a serene yet meaningful voice, he spoke of the beauty of the approaching transition, comparing it to a musician finishing an earthly symphony to begin a far grander cosmic composition. He expressed profound gratitude for having been allowed to glimpse, while still alive, the spiritual realms he would soon explore directly. Helen described how during his last conscious hours, Einstein seemed to be conversing with unseen presences, smiling frequently as if receiving visits from loved ones who had already made the transition. His last audible words, murmured in German, were an exclamation of wonder and joy. "It is even more beautiful than I imagined." Then, according to Helen, a soft light seemed to emanate from his face for a few moments, before physical silence finally settled. The manuscript revealed that After Einstein's death, Helen began experiencing her own spiritual manifestations. She described how the physicist occasionally appeared to her in lucid dreams, always radiating a profound peace and expanded wisdom. In these visits, he confirmed that he had found everything exactly as he had anticipated during his last months of earthly life. More importantly, he assured her that he would continue working, from higher dimensions to inspire future discoveries that would eventually scientifically prove the existence of the soul and the continuity of consciousness after physical death. Helen kept the manuscript secret for decades, gradually revealing it only to a few researchers, specializing in end-of-life experiences and expanded consciousness phenomena. She knew that Einstein had entrusted her with a tremendous responsibility to preserve until the appropriate moment revelations that could fundamentally transform our understanding of the nature of human existence. When the document finally became public, it provoked intense and polarized reactions. Skeptics questioned its authenticity, arguing apparent contradictions with Einstein's public positions on religion and spirituality. But manuscript analysis experts confirmed the authenticity of the handwriting and paper, while the internal consistency of the revelations themselves, their philosophical depth and their sophisticated integration with concepts of quantum physics strongly suggested that they had indeed emanated from the extraordinary mind of the great physicist. Even more significant was how Einstein's revelations aligned perfectly with recent discoveries in fields like neuroscience, quantum physics, and consciousness studies. Research on near-death experiences confirmed many of the phenomena he had described. Studies on quantum entanglement in biological systems suggested mechanisms by which consciousness could operate independently of the physical brain. Investigations into past life memories in young children provided empirical evidence for concepts of reincarnation that Einstein had embraced during his final months. The manuscript concluded with a powerful reflection on the spiritual legacy Einstein had left, not only his public scientific contributions, but also these intimate revelations about the eternal nature of the human soul. Helen wrote that Einstein's true genius resided not only in his ability to understand the physical laws of the universe, but in his courage to explore territories where science and spirituality converged into even deeper truths. The manuscript's final words echoed as a spiritual testament to all humanity. Death was not the end of the journey, but only the beginning of an infinitely grander cosmic adventure. Each human soul carried within it the same divine spark that had illuminated Einstein's mind, and each person had the potential to discover, in their own experience, the same transcendental truths that the great physicist had found during his last months of earthly life. The universe was not merely a cold and impersonal physical mechanism, but a living and conscious organism, where each individual soul contributed to an eternal cosmic symphony of discovery, love, and infinite evolution.